Good morning, and welcome to Karma Stories. Wishing you a day full of peace, truth, and just enough karma to keep things interesting. Stay with us for real tales where justice always finds its way. The government relocation package had conveniently omitted the chapter on homeowners associations. If it had, I might have reconsidered my assignment to the deceptively placid Hummingbird Grove. My name's Lane Miller, though my new neighbors know me as a freelance tech consultant. A deliberately vague cover that usually deflects further inquiry. In reality, I'm with the Department of Homeland Security, currently neck-deep in an operation targeting a rather sophisticated smuggling ring that, intelligence suggested, had a nexus point somewhere in this idyllic suburban sprawl. My rented house on Primrose Lane was perfect unobtrusive, good sightlines, and a backyard that backed onto a wooded preserve. Ideal for the discreet placement of my freelance tech equipment. To the untrained eye, it was just a collection of innocuous gadgets, a slightly oversized, modern-looking bird bath concealing a narrow band receiver, a decorative solar-powered pathlight that was a little too tall, hiding a micro-antenna array, and a sleek, minimalist weather station actually, a sophisticated atmospheric particulate sampler, crucial for detecting trace elements associated with the contraband we were tracking. All very subtle. All essential for Operation Nightingale. Or so I thought. Enter Karen Wilcox, HOA President of Hummingbird Grove. A woman whose peroxided helmet of hair seemed to function as its own personal radar for anything that deviated from her rigidly enforced vision of suburban perfection. She moved with the serene confidence of a petty dictator who knew every bylaw by heart, mostly because she'd likely written them herself during a fever dream fueled by lukewarm Chardonnay and an unquenchable thirst for absolute power over lawn ornaments. The first salvo arrived via email, a passive-aggressive exocet missile launched directly into my carefully constructed undercover persona's inbox. Subject: Urgent. Unidentified and concerning installations in yard. 12 Primrose Lane. Mr. Miller. It has come to the attention of the Hummingbird Grove Homeowners Association, HOA, that a number of unusual electronic devices have recently appeared on your property. While we encourage residents to embrace technology within approved parameters, of course, as outlined in Appendix D, Subsection 7 of the Community Guidelines, approved technological enhancements, the items in question appear somewhat out of place and are causing a degree of visual disruption to the harmonious streetscape we strive to maintain. Furthermore, concerns have been raised by discerning residents regarding potential electromagnetic radiation emissions and their possible impact on local flora, fauna, and the general tranquility of our shared environment. We would appreciate it if you could provide documentation detailing the nature, purpose, and safety certifications of these installations at your earliest convenience. For a more beautiful Hummingbird Grove, Karen Wilcox, President, HOA, Preserving Perfection, one property at a time. I read it twice, a slow burn starting in my gut. Discerning residents. That was Karen's speak for Karen, have discerned this, and therefore it is a universal truth. Electromagnetic radiation. My weather station put out less EMR than her damn microwave. The sheer unadulterated audacity? I was trying to stop international criminals, and she was worried about the feng shui of my particulate sampler. My training, of course, dictated minimal engagement. My cover was paramount. Responding would invite dialogue, scrutiny, and potentially a demand to inspect the devices, which was absolutely out of the question. So, I did what any highly trained federal agent deep undercover would do. I ignored it. I archived the email under local hostiles and got back to monitoring actual threats. Apparently, silence was not the answer Karen Wilcox was looking for. A few days later, a laminated notice, printed in an aggressive Comic Sans fond, was affixed to my front door with an alarming amount of weather-resistant tape. Hummingbird Grove Homeowners Association. Official Notice of Violation. Aesthetic Compliance. Property, 12 Primrose Lane. Violation. Unauthorized installation of non-standard technological devices, ref. Bylaw Generasi. Prohibition of unidentified external apparatuses. Description. Multiple unsightly electronic devices, including but not limited to oversized avian hydration station, anomalous illumination fixture, and unidentifiable meteorological data collection unit. These items are deemed to be a level 2 aesthetic intrusion, negatively impacting the visual harmony and potentially the property values of Hummingbird Grove. Action required. Remove all non-compliant devices within 7 days of this notice, or submit detailed plans and specifications for HOA Architectural Review Committee approval fees. Apply. Failure to comply will result in daily fines and further sanctions as per the HOA Charter. Karen Wilcox, HOA President. Your compliance is our community's radiance. Level 2 aesthetic intrusion. Did she invent these classifications on the fly? And anomalous illumination fixture. It was a goddamn light. My jaw tightened. This woman was going to compromise a federal investigation because my antenna didn't match her preferred color palette. The prohibition of unidentified external apparatuses bylaw was another gem. I'd heard whispers about it from my handler, who'd done a cursory background check on the HOA. Apparently, Karen had railroaded it through at a sparsely attended meeting last summer, claiming it was to prevent unsightly satellite dishes and amateur radio towers. No one present had dared question her. Her reign of terror over mismatched mailbox flags and insufficiently edged lawns was already legendary. The vote, as far as anyone could tell, consisted of Karen voting yes and her reflection in the polished meeting room table silently concurring. The neighborhood, as far as I could tell from my discreet observations, was a landscape of muted anxiety. I saw curtains twitch when Karen did her slow, regal patrols in her golf cart. The H. Mahine G. HOA logo emblazoned on the side like the crest of a minor noble house. People gave her wide berths at the community mailboxes. There were hushed conversations that abruptly ceased when she approached. They were all terrified of her, and her latest target was the new guy with the weird gadgets in his yard. Me, internally, I was a cocktail of frustration and disbelief. Every instinct screamed at me to confront her, to flash my credentials, figuratively speaking, of course, and watch her carefully constructed authority crumble. But Operation Nightingale was too important. These smugglers weren't just moving black market designer handbags. They were involved in far more dangerous contraband. My equipment was critical. Explaining its true purpose to Karen Wilcox was unthinkable. But letting her harass me into removing it could cripple weeks of careful intelligence gathering. A level 2 aesthetic intrusion, I muttered, staring at the notice. The irony was that if Karen knew what those unsightly devices were actually doing, protecting her and her harmonious streetscape from genuine threats, she'd probably demand a commendation and a dedicated plaque, or, more likely, try to take credit for the whole operation. My cover as a freelance tech consultant suddenly felt very thin. How long before Karen escalated from laminated notices to trying to physically dismantle my anomalous illumination fixture? The thought of Karen Wilcox, armed with a pair of garden shears and a righteous sense of aesthetic indignation, attempting to snip through a vital DHS antenna array, was both terrifying and darkly hilarious. This wasn't just an HOA dispute. This was rapidly becoming a matter of national security, one ridiculously worded violation notice at a time. My next report to my handler was going to be a classic. The 7-day deadline on Karen Wilcox's Level 2 aesthetic intrusion notice came and went. I, of course, had done precisely nothing to remove my unsightly electronic devices. My days were a blur of covert surveillance, data analysis, and trying to ignore the increasingly irate emails from Karen that were now arriving with alarming frequency. Each subject line more histrionic than the last. Final warning, impending fines, urgent, and my personal favorite. Writ, your continued disregard for community harmony and acceptable visual standards. I was half expecting one to arrive carried by a raven. Then, I had to make a quick, unavoidable trip out of town for 24 hours, a crucial meet with a confidential informant, miles away from Hummingbird Grove's suffocating preciosity. I left with a knot in my stomach. Not about the meet, but about what fresh hell Karen might unleash in my absence. I'd underestimated her. Badly. I returned to a series of increasingly frantic and encrypted messages from my DHS handler. Something was critically wrong. Upon entering my house, the first thing I noticed was that my anomalous illumination fixture, the micro antenna array, was listing at a drunken angle. A few wires dangling forlornly. The oversized avian hydration station had been tipped on its side, its carefully concealed receiver dish exposed to the elements. And the weather station. Dear God, the weather station. It looked like someone had tried to perform amateur surgery on it with a Phillips head screwdriver and a profound ignorance of delicate electronics. My blood ran colder than a Siberian winter. This wasn't just vandalism. This was a direct hit on active federal surveillance equipment. It turned out Karen Wilcox, emboldened by my absence and her own towering sense of self-importance, had decided to take matters into her own hands. And because this is the 21st century, and no act of petty tyranny is complete without an audience, she'd live-streamed the entire goddamn thing. On TikTok, the video, which my aghast colleagues at Langley had already downloaded and archived as evidence, and probably for future what not to let happen training seminars, was a masterpiece of Karen-esque performance art. There she was, Karen Wilcox, resplendent in a powder blue tracksuit and determination gleaming in her eyes, addressing her phone camera. "Good morning, Hummingbird Grove. Karen here, your HOA president, taking proactive steps to beautify our lovely community," she chirped, brandishing a screwdriver like it was the sword of truth. As you know, some residents don't quite grasp our aesthetic guidelines. So today, we're doing a little tech decluttering at 12 Primrose Lane. Let's restore that visual harmony. Shall we? The next 15 minutes were a horrifying montage of her fumbling with connections, prying open sealed casings, and narrating her every move with the misplaced confidence of a brain surgeon operating with a butter knife. Now, this little doohickey looks like it's just drawing power for no good reason. Snip, snip, she'd trilled, severing a crucial data cable. And this antenna thingy is just an eyesore. Let's see if we can't just gently. Oopsie. As my micro-antenna array was wrenched from its mounting, the oopsie she so blithely dismissed had near-catastrophic consequences. The moment she gently manhandled that antenna, a critical strategic communications channel had gone dead. That channel wasn't just for my local data. It was a daisy-chained relay node. Its failure had instantly severed DHS's real-time encrypted link with two separate, highly sensitive surveillance outposts along the southern border for 3 agonizing hours, while Karen Wilcox was busy becoming a TikTok sensation for all the wrong reasons. Those border teams were effectively blind and deaf, operating on emergency protocols in high-risk sectors. Back at DHS headquarters, alarms blared. A Level 2 alert, significant compromise of secure federal communications, was triggered. The FBI's Cybercrime Division and Domestic Terrorism Unit were looped in within minutes. High-level analysts, the kind who usually only got involved when things were hitting the fan on a national scale, began frantically trying to pinpoint the source of the outage. It didn't take them long. The timestamp on Karen's gleeful tech decluttering TikTok video, which some enterprising agent found trending under Ho nightmares, coincided to the second with the signal loss. While the feds were scrambling, I was in my backyard, heart hammering against my ribs, assessing the damage. My hands moved automatically, years of training kicking in. I bypassed the compromised primary systems, rerouted connections, and activated the heavily shielded, deeply buried backup transponder, a last resort measure. Less powerful, but hopefully still functional. I then sent a terse, coded message to my handler. Alpha site compromised. Civilian interference. Initiating ghost protocol. Immediate risk assessment required. Regional civilian actor. I couldn't blow my cover by explicitly naming the HOA, but regional civilian actor was as close as I could get to screaming. Karen Wilcox is a menace to national security. The official designation came down from FBI headquarters less than 24 hours later, after a flurry of encrypted communications and probably a few very loud, very sweary conference calls between federal agencies. You'd think that after inadvertently becoming a person of interest to multiple federal agencies, Karen Wilcox might lie low, perhaps take up a quiet hobby like competitive macrame or extreme bird watching. You would be wrong. So very, very wrong? Oblivious to the fact that her name was now circulating in secure government databases with more red flags than a Soviet May Day parade. Karen decided her 15 minutes of TikTok fame weren't nearly enough. She was ready for her encore. And this time, she was going full digital warrior. Her TikTok channel, formerly a relatively benign showcase of immaculate flower beds and passive-aggressive critiques of neighbors' holiday decorations, underwent a radical transformation. It was rebranded Suburban Freedom Mom. The profile picture changed from a smiling Karen holding a prize-winning rose to a dramatic, shadowy silhouette of a woman peering through Venetian blinds, presumably on the lookout for rogue Wi-Fi signals and unsightly technological abominations. The content was pure, unadulterated fear-mongering, custom-built for the paranoid corners of the internet. Her first video under the new banner was a masterpiece of manipulative editing. It featured shaky, zoomed-in footage of my now slightly battered but still functioning thanks to Ghost Protocol equipment. Friends, patriots, concerned parents. Karen's voice, artificially deepened and laden with faux concern, narrated over a soundtrack of ominous, royalty-free music. This is right behind my yard, in our supposedly safe Hummingbird Grove. Look at it. What is it really doing? Is it watching our children? Is it beaming harmful rays? The resident here, this so-called tech freelancer, I won't say a word. But the real pièce de resistance was her use of AI. She'd somehow managed to get a sample of my voice, probably from a brief, unavoidable exchange we'd had when I first moved in. Something utterly innocuous like, "Morning, nice weather." From that, she'd synthesized a chillingly convincing, albeit short, audio clip in her next video. After a long diatribe about hidden government agendas in our backyards, she played it, a clipped, robotic version of my voice saying, "These installations are part of a Department of Homeland Security residential monitoring initiative." It was a lie, of course, a complete, bald-faced fabrication created with cheap software and a bottomless well of malice. But to her rapidly growing audience of conspiracy theorists and HOA haters who, ironically, now saw her as some kind of folk hero, it was gospel. The comments section exploded. Deutsch in our neighborhoods. Big brother resist. She didn't stop there. Karen, or rather Suburban Freedom Mom, launched a website, right2landscape.org. It was a GeoCities-esque horror of clashing fonts and flashing GIFs, purporting to be a resource for homeowners battling invasive and aesthetically displeasing technology. It featured a Know Your Rights section filled with completely fabricated HOA bylaws that supposedly gave residents carte blanche to dismantle any tech they didn't like. There were even helpful illustrated guides, clearly drawn by someone whose artistic talent peaked in 5th grade, on how to disable common security cameras and weather stations using household tools, directly referencing the suspicious devices at 12 Primrose Lane. It was an instruction manual for vandalism, gift-wrapped in paranoid rhetoric, and Karen, bless her black little heart, understood the power of promotion. She started pumping money into advertising her TikToks. Suddenly, Suburban Freedom Mom was popping up everywhere. Her videos, dripping with misinformation and fear, were racking up tens of thousands of views. They were being shared, re-edited, and amplified by established anti-government and anti-technology extremist groups, each one adding their own layer of paranoia. My anomalous illumination fixture was becoming the new Area 51. Then came the local press. Karen, a veritable Svengali of suburban spin, penned an op-ed for the Hummingbird Grove Herald, a weekly paper mostly concerned with lost pets and bake sale announcements, now thrust onto the front lines of a national security incident. The headline, which I'm sure she dictated herself, read, "Local Mom Stands Up to Shadowy Surveillance, a Fight for Privacy and Property Rights in Hummingbird Grove." The article painted her as a plucky David battling a secretive, high-tech Goliath, conveniently omitting the part where her slingshot was a screwdriver that had nearly crippled a multi-million-dollar federal operation. The real-world consequences weren't far behind. One Saturday morning, I woke up to the sounds of chanting, peeking through my blinds, feeling, ironically, like Suburban Freedom Mom's profile picture. I saw a crowd of about 30 people on the sidewalk in front of my house. They were carrying crudely made signs. "No spies in Hummingbird Grove. My yard. My choice. What are you hiding?" 12 Primrose Lane. A local news van, emblazoned with the logo of Channel 6, was setting up its camera. Karen Wilcox, looking somber and heroic, was giving an impassioned interview, gesturing dramatically towards my house. I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. These people, whipped into a frenzy by Karen's lies, genuinely believed I was some nefarious agent of a deep state surveillance program, monitoring their Tupperware parties and barbecue schedules. They had no idea I was the guy actively working to stop actual criminals from potentially harming their community. They had no idea the equipment they were protesting was, in a very real sense, protecting them. The irony was so thick, it was suffocating. My handler was on the secure line almost immediately. Lane, situation has escalated. The director is displeased. Public Affairs is trying to manage the media narrative without compromising the operation. But this suburban freedom mom is a loose cannon. We can't have a mob compromising evidence or, worse, getting themselves or you hurt. Tell me something I don't know, I muttered. Watching a protester in a tinfoil hat try to explain to the Channel 6 reporter how my weather station was probably controlling the chemtrails. The media, at least initially, lapped it up. The narrative of a brave mom fighting for her community against a shadowy, unresponsive tech guy was too juicy to resist. My carefully constructed cover, my mission, my sanity, all were being systematically dismantled by Karen Wilcox, a woman whose primary motivation seemed to be an unquenchable desire to control what other people did with their own damn yards. Now turbocharged by the intoxicating power of online notoriety, I was a federal agent, trained to deal with hardened criminals and complex threats. But nothing in the DHS manual had prepared me for how to handle a weaponized HOA president with a TikTok account, a talent for AI voice cloning, and an army of misguided protesters on my lawn. This wasn't just a level 2 aesthetic intrusion anymore. This was a 5-alarm dumpster fire of misinformation, and I was tied to the hydrant. What did you think of today's story? If it made your day, drop a good in the comments. If it didn't hit the mark, just type 1. Got your own thoughts? I'd love to hear them below. And hey, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's free, and it really helps the channel grow. Thank you so much for being here. The protest outside my house, fueled by Karen Wilcox's expertly crafted digital lies, was becoming a daily circus. Channel 6 had practically set up a semi-permanent camp. My carefully maintained cover as a freelance tech consultant was hanging by a thread, and Operation Nightingale was teetering on the brink. Every time I saw Suburban Freedom Mom giving another tearful, impassioned interview about fighting for our children's privacy, I had to physically restrain myself from storming out there and showing the world the official DHS dossier on her. The one detailing her unknowing or perhaps not so unknowing aid to a major smuggling operation. But the wheels of federal justice, though sometimes slow, grind exceedingly fine, especially when national security is on the line. While Karen was busy cultivating her online Marte persona, the FBI wasn't just monitoring her TikToks for laughs. They were building a case, and the linchpin, her own beloved technology. The FBI raid on Karen Wilcox's home wasn't a dramatic, sirens blaring affair. It was quiet, precise, and terrifyingly efficient, executed while she was at a county commissioner's meeting, presumably trying to lobby for a municipal ban on all garden gnomes taller than 6 inches. They had a warrant, citing probable cause related to the destruction of federal property, interference with federal communications, and inciting public disorder. When Karen returned, smugly triumphant from her civic engagement, she found her house crawling with FBI agents meticulously bagging and tagging every laptop, tablet, smartphone, and external hard drive she owned. The queen of aesthetic harmony was having her digital life turned upside down. The contents of those devices, once decrypted and analyzed by the FBI's cyber forensics unit, painted a picture far more sinister than even I had imagined. This wasn't just about a power-tripping HOA president with a vendetta against modern art disguised as weather stations. This was about greed, manipulation, and a breathtaking level of calculated deceit. First, there were the emails, a long, incriminating thread between Karen Wilcox and a shady-sounding company called SecureCom Home IoT Solutions. They weren't discussing how to remove technology. They were discussing how to replace it. Karen, it seemed, had a grand vision. She'd been in talks with SecureCom Home to install a privately owned, HOA-managed smart neighborhood surveillance and data collection system throughout Hummingbird Grove. Her pitch to them was that the existing, unsightly state-owned apparatus my DHS gear could be easily discredited and removed. paving the way for their superior, aesthetically integrated commercial system. She was literally trying to kick out the federal government so she could install her own private spy network. Attached to one of those emails was a draft contract. My blood pressure spiked when my handler read me the details over a secure line. Secure.com Home would install and maintain the system, and the Hummingbird Grove HOA would get 40% of the profits from selling the aggregated. Anonymized, yeah? Right? Resident data to third-party marketers, and tucked away in a little clause titled Facilitator's Fee. A tidy 10% of the HOA's cut would go directly to the designated signatory representing the HOA's interests. That signatory, of course, was Karen Wilcox. She wasn't just a control freak. She was a wannabe data baroness. Then there was the map. On her main desktop, forensic analysts found a meticulously detailed schematic of my backyard, with all my DHS equipment clearly labeled. But it wasn't just a map. There were handwritten, well, typed in a fussy, cursive font annotations. Optimal camera angle for Livestream. Afternoon sun. Best leverage point for antenna removal. Use small crowbar. Primary data cable. Cut here for maximum disruption. This wasn't an accidental oopsie during a beautification effort. This was premeditated sabotage, planned with the precision of a military operation, all designed to maximize her TikTok drama and further her scheme to replace my gear with her profit-generating alternative. And those resident votes Karen kept citing, the ones that supposedly gave her the mandate to enforce her draconian tech bylaws and wage war on my equipment. The FBI found the original ballots. They were Google Forms, created by Karen herself. The signature list was a joke, a mishmash of obvious forgeries, names of former residents. And in one particularly audacious case, Mickey Mouse. She hadn't just bent the rules. She'd invented a whole new democratic process starring herself as the sole voter and beneficiary. But the most satisfying revelation, the one that truly turned Karen into a public pariah, came from the analysis of her suburban Freedom Mom TikTok videos. The FBI's own AI-powered voice analysis unit took a deep dive into that faked audio clip of me supposedly confessing to a DHS residential monitoring initiative within hours. They had irrefutable proof of digital manipulation, discrepancies in vocal frequency, telltale artifacts of AI synthesis. The FBI didn't just sit on this information. They held a press conference, a stern-faced special agent in charge, with the DHS and local police chiefs standing grimly beside him. Laid it all out for the national news. They played Karen's TikTok. Then they played the isolated audio of my confession. And then, with devastating clarity, they showed the spectrographic analysis, proving, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it was a deepfake. Miss Wilcox didn't just damage federal property and incite public unrest. The SAC stated, his voice like chipped granite. She actively fabricated evidence and spread malicious disinformation to manipulate her community and the public at large, all while apparently pursuing a commercial venture to unlawfully monetize resident data. The effect was instantaneous. The crowd of protesters outside my house, who had been so fervent just hours before, seemed to melt away. The Channel 6 news van, which had been practically a permanent fixture, packed up with record speed. Karen's Suburban Freedom Mom TikTok account was nuked from orbit by the platform for violating terms of service regarding misinformation and harmful content. Right to landscape. Org vanished into the digital ether. The Hummingbird Grove HOA board members, who had previously acted like Karen's terrified, compliant acolytes, suddenly found their voices, one by one. They tendered their resignations, issuing a joint public statement that was a masterclass in backpedaling and blame shifting. The undersigned, were deeply misled and manipulated by former President Wilcox through the presentation of falsified data, fabricated resident consent, and the stoking of unfounded fears. We had no knowledge of her personal financial schemes or her deliberate efforts to deceive this community. We resign in protest of her egregious actions. I watched it all unfold from the quiet anonymity of my living room, a sense of weary vindication washing over me. Karen Wilcox, the self-appointed guardian of suburban aesthetics in digital Luddite, had been brought down by the very technology she'd tried to demonize and exploit. Her carefully constructed narrative of a brave mom fighting the system had been obliterated by cold, hard, digital facts. The irony was so rich, It was practically fattening. Operation Nightingale was still compromised. There was still a mess to clean up. But the primary source of civilian-generated chaos had finally been neutralized, not by a federal agent, but by her own tangled web of technological deceit. The implosion of Karen Wilcox's carefully curated world was swift and, from my admittedly biased perspective, deeply satisfying. The FBI press conference, with its stark debunking of her deep-faked audio and the revelation of her data-for-profit scheme, had eviscerated any lingering public sympathy she might have cultivated. Suburban Freedom Mom was no longer a plucky underdog. She was a con artist who'd played on people's fears for personal gain and, in the process, stumbled into a hornet's nest of federal laws. The federal indictment that followed was a thing of legal beauty, a veritable symphony of charges that underscored just how far Karen had strayed from worrying about lawn edging. There was no mention of Level 2 aesthetic intrusions here. This was the big leagues. Karen Wilcox was formally charged with obstruction of a federal investigation and impeding a national security operation. Turns out, taking a screwdriver to DHS equipment and disrupting border surveillance isn't just frowned upon, it's a felony. Willful destruction of government property. That anomalous illumination fixture and oversized avian hydration station had price tags that included a lot of taxpayer zeros. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud. For her scheme with Secure Com Home IoT solutions to install a private data harvesting network. Use of deceptive audio-visual material deepfake to incite public unrest and defame. The AI-generated voice clip of me became Exhibit A in how technology could be weaponized to spread disinformation. Attempting to operate an unlicensed telecommunications and data brokerage business, her dreams of becoming a data baroness hit a significant regulatory wall, defrauding a community through misrepresentation and forgery. Those faked Google form votes and her entire concerned mom persona came back to bite her hard. Her digital empire, once her greatest weapon, became the prosecution's treasure trove. Every TikTok video, every inflammatory post on Right2 Landscape, org before it was scrubbed from the internet by federal order. Every email promising visual harmony while plotting commercial exploitation was meticulously cataloged as evidence. The digital breadcrumbs she'd so arrogantly scattered led directly to a federal courtroom. Karen Wilcox, who had tried to use the perceived evils of technology to whip up a mob, was going to be undone by the irrefutable truth contained within her own hard drives and server logs. The irony was delicious enough to serve as a 3-course meal. The Hummingbird Grove Homeowners Association, now headless and thoroughly discredited, didn't just collapse. It was formally dissolved by a court order stemming from the investigation into its fraudulent activities and Karen's abuse of power. The city, eager to distance itself from the scandal and restore some semblance of order, stepped in. In place of the HOA, a new interim residence council was established. Its formation and initial bylaws overseen by the city attorney's office. The era of Karen's iron-fisted and deeply self-serving rule over paint swatches and petunia placement was officially over. I imagined a collective sigh of relief rippling through the neighborhood, so profound it probably registered on my now fully repaired and recalibrated atmospheric particulate sampler. My own departure from Hummingbird Grove was as quiet and unremarkable as my arrival had been, at least on the surface. With Karen neutralized and Operation Nightingale needing a strategic reset and relocation due to the compromised environment, my assignment here was concluded. There were no moving vans in the dead of night. No dramatic goodbyes. One morning, Lane Miller, freelance tech consultant, simply wasn't there anymore. The house on Primrose Lane was empty. The lawn immaculately and ironically manicured by a DHS cleanup crew specializing in discreet exfiltrations. All my freelance tech equipment, the bird bath, the path light, the weather station, vanished as silently as it had appeared, leaving behind nothing but smooth, undisturbed grass. It was as if the entire technological saga had been a strange, suburban fever dream. A few weeks after I'd gone, my former handler, in a moment of unofficial debriefing, forwarded me a photo taken by a sympathetic and now greatly relieved resident of Hummingbird Grove. The community, shaken from its Karen-induced stupor, had apparently done some soul-searching, where my fence had once stood, bordering the common area that Karen had tried to turn into her personal fiefdom. A new, Small wooden sign had been erected. It wasn't an official city sign, nor did it bear any HOA insignia, thank God. It was simple, hand-carved, and spoke volumes. The engraving was neat, understated, and deeply resonant. Not all signals are bad, and not everyone demanding a landscape cleanup is for the community. I allowed myself a small, grim smile. It wasn't exactly a monument to my efforts or a plaque detailing the near catastrophe averted. But in its own quiet, suburban way, it was a perfect epitaph for the whole insane affair. A testament to the fact that sometimes the loudest voices demanding conformity are the ones with the most to hide. And that truth, even when buried under layers of digital deception and HOA bylaws, has a funny way of eventually finding the light. Karen Wilcox, I later learned, took a plea deal, facing significant fines and a lengthy probation that strictly prohibited her from ever holding a position in any community governance organization or operating any public-facing social media account again. Suburban Freedom Mom was permanently silenced. Her crusade against unsightly technology and shadowy surveillance ending not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a federal judge's gavel. As for me, I was already on to the next assignment, in another town, with another cover. But I'd carry the lessons of Hummingbird Grove with me. That the most unexpected threats can come in the most unassuming packages. That a screwdriver in the wrong hands can be as dangerous as any weapon. And that sometimes, the fight for national security looks less like a Tom Clancy novel and more like a really bad HOA dispute. And that, no matter how advanced your surveillance technology, you should probably still budget for a decent lawyer and a very high fence, just in case. What did you think of today's story? If it made your day, drop a good in the comments. If it didn't hit the mark, just type 1. Got your own thoughts? I'd love to hear them below. And hey, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's free, and it really helps the channel grow. Thank you so much for being here.